Are you ready to shatter ceilings, to redefine what's possible in your life and business? Then welcome to the Beyond Woman podcast, where we dive deep into the heart of empowerment, the art of crafting a lifestyle business that truly serves you, and the tools to unlock your most authentic, powerful self. I'm your host, Jacqueline Walker-Johnson, and here we celebrate the women who are rewriting the rules, the visionaries carving their own paths, and the experts who are sharing their hard-won wisdom to guide us all. Join us for intimate conversations with women who are not just talking the talk, but walking the walk. Women who have the expertise and the sheer grit to empower you to step into your limitless potential. Get ready to be inspired, challenged, and transformed. This is the Beyond Woman podcast. Let's begin. Welcome again to another Beyond Woman Conversations. Every now and then we meet a woman whose story forces us to pause, not just because of what she's accomplished, but because of who she's become in the process. Today's guest is one of those women, Dee-Ann Kentish-Rogers, a trailblazer in every sense of the word. Attorney at law, politician, athlete, former athlete, I need to put that in. And of course, the first Black Caribbean woman to be crowned Miss Universe Great Britain. But what I love most about her isn't just, the list of titles, but it's her depth, her clarity, and the way she moves with purpose. She's proof that grace and grit can exist in the same breath. So today we're slowing down the pace and getting personal with Dee-Ann. We're talking about what led her into politics, the stories behind Small Island Big Dreams. Really want to hear about that, and what she's still learning about herself and how she finds joy away from the spotlight. So if you have ever questioned whether small beginnings can lead to something extraordinary, this conversation will remind you that they absolutely can. Welcome, Dee-Ann. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Beyond Woman Conversations, right after your cover feature on our magazine.
Yes, thank you.
How are you doing?
I'm doing amazing. Thank you so much, Jacqueline, for giving me the honor of being on your feature magazine. So my family and everyone here has been raving about it. So now I know I can't put down the gauntlet.
Exactly. All right. So before we get into everything, I know we touched a little bit on your background, your upbringing in Antigua in the magazine, right? But I really would love for you I want to hear it from you, your voice. I want you to paint the picture. What was it like growing up in Antigua, the beginning years?
Yeah. So there's a very interesting story as to how I was born in Antigua, because like many small island developing nations, back in the early 90s, and I know that it's not that long ago, our hospital resources in Anguilla were quite limited. And something that a lot of Black women face during pregnancy is a condition called preeclampsia. And my mother happened to, unfortunately, develop preeclampsia and had to be transported to Antigua to give birth to me because the hospital in Anguilla could not accommodate that complicated birthing situation. And so I was born in Antigua. I was actually, my mom's doctor was actually my great uncle. And it was a very interesting story for me because the first time I heard about this was when I was 18. And I grew up we traveled back to Anguilla, and I had a few years at preschool in Anguilla. And then my aunt actually asked me if I was interested in coming to Antigua for a few years. So I went back to Antigua for a few years in primary school. And then my mom said she missed me too much. And then I went back to Anguilla. So it was a very simple childhood. And I'm very privileged to have been able to have a childhood and live like a child. My concerns were never with providing for myself, but rather with ensuring that I was following my family's orders. We had a very big family, all my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, we all lived in one house. And of course, I was the only girl, so I was bullied tremendously until I started to bully them back. It's very necessary for balance. And we just That really solidified my understanding of community. Having a lot of people who are looking out for you. You know, my uncle and my aunt used to take all of the kids to school every day. They used to call themselves the Magic School Bus. And it was like five of us that dropping us off to different schools, and later on my cousin would come and pick me up in our jalopy. We used to call him Ralph because he had there was a hole in the the floor of the passenger seat, so you could see the road underneath you as you're driving past. So, but none of these things ever bothered us. It made island life kind of charming and fun and funny. So I really enjoyed my childhood. I really enjoyed growing up in Anguilla, and being around my family and my friends. It was a very beautiful experience.
Wonderful. It really sounds beautiful. And I must do a little bit of a correction because I said, well, you kind of rescued me. You really are from Anguilla.
Mm.
And I said Antigua, but then you were born in Antigua and you lived there for a little while. So
Yes.
it works out both ways.
Yes, it does. Yeah, it does.
I love how you talk about the community. And that is one of the things that, we're always mentioning, the days long gone when, community was an important part of our Caribbean upbringing. Mm-hmm. I don't know, with the advent of social media and just the opening of the world I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that it no longer exists, or does it still? What?
I've had a little bit of an epiphany in relation to what I think has happened to community in our nations. And I think part of what has happened is that because we are living more individually comfortable lives, the inconvenience that comes with community does not fit into. So there is a little bit of an inconvenience that comes with community. It means that you have to give up your time that you probably would have had to yourself, or time that you would have preferred to go and binge watch a show on Netflix, and your resources to kind of continue to see the community thrive. You would have to, there's a young person from your community who has a football match, and you decide, okay, well, I'm going to take it upon myself to go and support. So the things that create community, the organic nature of, okay, I'm showing up at people's houses without calling and this is something that used to happen when I was small all the time. And I used to be like, why are people outside the house? But that was part of the community. People would just show up and then they're talking with your grandmother for hours and hours on end. And you're like, these people don't, and in my mind as a young person, I was like, these people don't have a home. But then you realize that is how they kind of kept community alive. It wasn't about convenience. It was about ensuring that connection was maintained. As individuals, we've created a lot of boundaries for our personal family lives. And I can understand where some of those boundaries came, but I do think that we have created so many boundaries. We've actually created a wall that separates us from our communities.
You putting it that way really does put a different spin on it. You mentioned the word boundaries, and it is so important because whether we want to admit it or not, there's a lot of toxicity that existed, right? And so our awareness has led us to create these boundaries So yes. When you look at it, I know that's in isolation, but when you look at it from that perspective and others, what do you think? Do you think, and is there a way that we could probably redefine what community is rather than for it to just go away completely?
That's a very interesting question. And I do believe that we can do some redefining, because obviously as we would have seen things that we didn't particularly like in the past that we would have tried and amended our behavior to address. And it's something that one of my elders used to always say to me, and it was that we create culture. We act as though culture is something that's fixed in stone, but we create culture. So if it is something that we do want to see persist, I think we have the ability to say, well, even if I have very strict boundaries around, okay, well, who can show up at my house uninvited or otherwise, that I do set out for myself, like every single Saturday of the month, I will do X, or I will show up, or I will be there. So I think what it requires is a certain level of intentionality. And if we are aware that we're losing those community values, then that intentionality becomes even more important, you know? And I can say for myself, I have family friends who feel like aunties, who I call Auntie Sonia, Auntie. They're not actually family members of mine, but because they were just so present, they became a part of my community. And so I think if we develop that type of intentionality, we can get back, even if it doesn't feel the same as it used to, that we can get back a sense of community that creates some structure and support for our communities.
Yes, I totally agree with this whole matter of intentionality. It's a conversation that can be continued. You know what I mean? That it's a big conversation because we don't really want to lose the positive values of what community will bring to our space, you know. But anyway, we have a lot to talk about, Dee-Ann. But that was a wonderful way to start, right?
Yeah.
So I want to move into a section that I have coined breaking barriers. And you've broken boundaries, barriers that had been crossed before. You know, you made history as the first Caribbean woman to be crowned Miss Universe Great Britain. Tell us what that crown and that moment symbolizes for you, or symbolized for you, and for, you know, just your Caribbean women who are looking on.
You know, one of the things that I particularly love about Caribbean women is that they're very audacious. I mean, in our day-to-day lives, we live among very audacious women, and maybe because we don't see them often in a global context, we sometimes imagine that they don't belong in certain spaces. But I actually really, I hold a very firm belief that the global community could benefit from more Caribbean women in all spaces.
I love that.
And as a young woman who entered Miss Universe Great Britain, I was surrounded by people who reminded me that my exceptionalism, in that I was one of the few Black women who were participating in that show, was not a handicap. I was consistently reminded. And when I stepped on the stage, and when I decided to really push myself and go for it, there was a particular exercise that we did during the Miss Universe Great Britain finals weekend, where we had to actually punch through a piece of wood. And you were supposed to write on the piece of wood your greatest insecurity. What is it that's holding you back from trying to get this title? And I still have the piece of wood here. I have a picture of it on my phone, and I wrote, "Not what they're looking for." That's what I wrote on the board. I'm not what they're looking for. Yes, I feel audacious. Yes, I feel like I have what it's necessary, but there was still something in the back of my head saying, well, are you what they're looking for though? They're probably looking for someone who shares the same cultural, racial, and ethical and ethnic practices to the country that is hosting the pageant. And so I really had to set my mind and free my mind from that perspective, because often we don't know what anyone is looking for, and we can find those things in ourselves. So if we can unbox our audaciousness and give it free rein to exist in any space, I really believe that Caribbean women really should be the ones running the globe. I really do believe that because they are there is something extremely special, and I mean I can speak from persons who I come day to day come across in my life, women like you and my mom who don't allow themselves to be limited by what has or has not been done before. And that really is the spirit of the Caribbean woman. And that pageant and winning that pageant was a symbol of another step that we can take. It wasn't a limitation. It was to break a limitation. But once the seal was open, I think there have been 4 other Black women to win the title after myself. So it's just to show that we are limited only by our own perspectives.
I love that. Like, I mean, I feel so good to hear you talk about us in that way because I share your views. I think that we are so brilliant and we're so creative, especially the creative part of it, and I just feel like we can flourish wherever, and more of us need to just step out, as you said, unbox our audacity or audaciousness and just do what is in our heart because it's there, And sometimes I want to ask you this question. I'm just loving this conversation. I want to ask, do you think that the way we are as Caribbean women is because of things passed down, what our ancestors have gone through, what we let's talk a little bit about that.
That gave me goosebumps. Yeah, I do believe that it is in our DNA to be audacious. It's when we look at our history, and I can speak from Anguilla's history, when we talk about things like the Anguillan Revolution, we herald the men who will hold the title of father of the nation. We don't have a mother of the nation, but it was women who were on the front line on our shores during the revolution, guarding and protecting the island. So when you think about our history, about the fact that men would have left Anguilla and they would have left women and children here to go and find work in other territories, it was the women in Anguilla who really plowed the soil, who took care of Anguilla, who watered Anguilla, who started the legacy of Anguilla and maintained it. And when we are asked, where do we get our resilience from? Sometimes it's difficult to come to a direct answer, but it's very obvious to me that it comes from survival. It is a hallmark of a people who have come from having to survive hardship, that we no longer have or from our ancestors, we no longer allow ourselves to simply be defined by our hardship. And you can look at any Caribbean woman, they're styling and profiling, they're going down the street, they're looking beautiful, they're in their rich, beautiful colors. And you would never know what that woman is personally struggling with at home or at work. I mean, there's so many tales and stories of women who they get up in the morning and they have to go and they have to perform, and you would never know. And you would never know. And that type of resilience, to me, comes from our history.
And, I'm listening to you, and I don't know if we're going to get to the end of this conversation because, there's just so many things that we can unpack, you know what I mean? And I'm listening to you, and I'm as much as we are resilient, we still hold ourselves back. We still question ourselves.
And I can't help but say, I think that is another remnant of our history. I think that is another remnant of our history. And that's why I said we have to unbox, because we don't give ourselves permission to unleash the full extent of our creativity and our audaciousness. I think that society has had a role in trying to define what we can and cannot do. And many of us have questioned it, but there's always, and I think it's natural for all women, there's a little doubt that is in the back of your head about should I, could I, and it's an incessant little voice that you have to kind of stamp down on. But getting the courage to stamp down on it is a task in and of itself.
Yeah, it's a challenge because we grew up with this whole patriarchy thing over our heads, and our role already established. We talk about the community, and now I'm thinking about my grandmother, and I remember when I just got married, and I would hear the question, "You're not going home to go cook for your husband?" You know what I
Yes.
mean? And so we struggle with all of those things, that how we're socialized, how we're cultured, and I think that's where and then another thing, oh my goodness, another thing is this whole thing about we don't necessarily have racism, but we have classism. And
Classism.
I think that
Yes.
stems from who used to work in the field as opposed to who used to work. I tell you that we have a lot of stuff that we can unpack,
Mm-hmm.
and we're just struggling with those kinds of things, I believe.
Yeah.
Just the same. And as you said, we just have to find the means, and we have to get to a place where we know ourselves and we find the means to unpack and to just stand up in our power and in our greatness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's true.
So we want to talk about your discipline and your drive. So from pageant to politics, there's a clear line of discipline right there. So I want to talk a little bit about that. But before we get there, I also want to mention a little bit about the fact that you were a former student athlete. And I want to ask you this question. How did sports, or did it even shape you or give you the ability to thrive under pressure? How did that allow you to bounce back from setbacks, that kind of thing? Let us know how that had influenced your journey.
I when I was a student athlete, I think I learned more, and this is going to be a very drastic statement, so we'll have to assess it, I guess, at some point. But in terms of life, how life operates, how I operate in terms of the wider world around me, I learned more from sports than I did from my formal education.
Wow.
I learned way more from sports than I learned from my formal education. And it instilled the value of you get out what you put in. So if you don't show up, if you're not disciplined, then you can't get the results that you want. It's impossible. If you're unwilling to make sacrifices, like for instance, it might sound simple, but if you can't make dietary sacrifices to ensure that your body has everything it needs for you to get it to perform the way you want it to perform, then how are you going to get the outcome that you desire? And so from a mindset perspective, sports shaped a lot of how I view the world. And then there's the interpersonal perspective. You're working in teams, whether or not it's on the football field, and you have to deal with other people's emotions. You have to deal with other person's commands. You have to deal with hierarchy. You have to deal with your coaches. You have to motivate. You have to motivate others, and then you have to self-motivate. And then you have to deal with disagreements. And there were stakes. The stake was you wanted to win. You wanted to bring home the trophy and bring pride to your nation. And if you couldn't navigate all of those things and develop your own personal manifesto of how you deal with people, or how you treat people, how you interact with your coaches, how do you advocate for others, then how do you exist in other teams outside of sports? Are you a team player? Are you more of a solo person, more independently led, more independently driven? And it revealed a lot of those questions for me. Those answers, I think, have followed me to this day. You know, I am a team player. Sometimes people will try to appeal to the more selfish part of you, and everyone has a bit of selfishness. We're structured and engineered to be a little selfish. But how do you balance between those selfish desires and wanting to see the team win? You know, and those are the things that have stayed with me to this day.
I love that. And when we talk about, law and politics, there's a lot of, I would say, from a woman's perspective, there's a lot of competition involved in those areas, a lot of scrutiny also.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the things that causes you to still show up in these areas nonetheless?
It's the dream. You know, I will say that if there's something that I am very guilty of, it is my idealism. I have always been a very idealistic thinker, and striving towards some sort of utopia. And I know that utopia doesn't exist, but I do believe in the value of striving towards something better. And so even when I'm in spaces, or I've been in spaces that have centered criticism and comparison, I have always attempted to keep the goal as center, as the North Star. Because
Right.
you can become distracted and it can become very loud. And that's why a lot of people are removed from their purpose. And it reminds me of the book by Simon Sinek, Start with Why and keep coming back to why. And if you have to keep coming back to why, because otherwise sometimes you're like, this is not worth it. It's not worth the personal trauma. It's not worth the stress. It's not worth the headache. But if your why is important enough to you, it can help you navigate those very unforgiving spaces, especially in law and politics. I was reminded by my aunt yesterday. We had a conversation after going to court, and she said to me, you know, I told her my idealism always made me struggle with, you know, how are we actually getting to justice? How are we ensuring that people get justice? And she said to me, you know, justice is ephemeral. You know, if you really want to do not just yourself, your client, but the world a favor, don't necessarily look for justice, look for the truth. And that has been my new pursuit. It has been to acknowledge my idealism and the limitations that my idealism can place on me, while pursuing a course of action that would ensure that my values can still be respected within them.
Yes, that's a lot right there. And just have this question is just coming in my head, because when you think about law, or my limited understanding of it, is the truth really important though? You said that you do your client and yourself a favor to tell them that you're pursuing your truth. But is that a general thing though? Or is that a you thing, you, Dee-Ann?
I cannot say that it is a general thing. What I can say is a simplistic view of justice is that the same set of facts, wherever they are held, would result in the same outcome. That would be justice.
Mm-hmm.
The same set of facts would always receive the same outcome. But if we know the world we live in, and the same set of facts come before courts, and there are completely different outcomes, which to me is a signal that our expectations of justice are not necessarily what justice metes out. And therefore, even if it may not, and it is to ensure that myself, as in my role as an officer of the court, which is not to ever mislead the court. That's actually my role. My role is not to mislead the court. And that means mislead it by the virtue of the request of someone else or on my own doing. I'm not supposed to mislead the court. That is our fundamental obligation as lawyers. And so my pursuit of the truth is in pursuit of my actual role of not misleading the court.
Yes, I get it. Yes. Yeah.
So, I can't speak for every lawyer. I can't speak for everyone who is in the practice of the law as to what their motivations are, what they pursue. But I can say that those are mine. And I'm young, according to them, I'm young in the practice of the law. And I still have a lot to learn and a lot to grow. And I never take it for granted that life is a learning experience, and I will continue to develop my perspectives. But that's something that I feel very strongly about.
And I love that about you, and I love that for you. And this leads me to my other question, where you talk about service over status, right?
Mm-hmm.
And once again, we know the kind of world that we're living in.
Mm-hmm.
But share with us how that conviction came about. Was that just always a part of who you are?
Mm-hmm.
Share, let us know about that.
Jacqueline, I think it was always a part of me, but you never know what your values are until they're tested.
Right.
You can say I believe in I believe in family and loyalty. Like, I'm a loyal person, but if your loyalty has never been tested, how do you know that you're a loyal person? And so I've had, and I think God has tested me in multiple occasions to ask me, do you prefer or demonstrate in your life whether or not you actually prefer service over status? And while those occasions were not as linear as I thought they would be, so, on a theoretical basis, if you just asked me service over status, I would automatically say service. But sometimes those very issues are connected to other things, which you then have to detangle. So things like, okay, well, what's the perspectives of the people that I care about this? How do I stratify, and where do I land personally? And that is where I think my real perspective of service over status was birthed. Because one thing my mom always used to tell me is, you have to make sure that when you go home, you can sleep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And status is something that really can be taken away at any point in time. Titles don't travel with you to the grave. I don't want to make it morbid, but they don't travel with you to the grave.
Reality.
And I had the opportunity when I did a study tour, and I won't go too much into depth into this, but I did a study tour of Israel and Palestine in 2022. And that tour really anchored my perspective. Seeing that conflict up front and close, I really then came to really understand that there is a bigger objective outside of you as an individual. And while your ego may be served by choosing status, while you may feel personally fulfilled by choosing status, there's a world and there is a history that will remember your service. And that's really how I got there.
And we leave it. I mean, that's like, we don't even need to add to that, right?
Yeah.
We don't need to add to that. And there's nothing like really walking your talk, because a lot of people, we talk, and,
Mm-hmm.
there's really nothing behind it of any sort. All right. So I want to move into another area where we're going to talk a little bit about identity and influence. And you've carried the identity of our Caribbeanness
Mhm.
wherever you have gone. What's one quality of the Caribbean woman? And you talked about, the fact that we should be running the world.
We really should. We really should.
But tell us one quality of the Caribbean woman that the world desperately needs right now.
There's so many gaps in the world right now. Let me think about that. I really believe that in many circles, the world needs Caribbean women's fearlessness. And I see more and more that fear is becoming a major component in the world that we live in. People are they're driven to do things through fear, by fear. They are driven to silence through their fear. And our understanding of one another is now being punctuated by fear. And I really believe that the openness and fearlessness of Caribbean women really allows us to really see people for as individuals, people, everyone's struggling through this life the same way, and the ability to challenge things that are inherently unjust and unfair. And so I really do think that the world needs the fearlessness of Caribbean women, but I'm also cautious in just advocating for our fearlessness for us to just be fearless on behalf of everything and everyone, because I know that can lead to our own burnout and to us feeling the need to be everything to everyone. It's a very fine line and a fine balance to really draw. But ultimately, we were placed and given the opportunity to live this life, and we have to live it with keeping in mind our values and our integrity and what we really believe in. And I do believe that if we believe in something, that we should pursue it. And I think that that's what the world really needs.
I love that. And it's listening to you, Dee-Ann, it's bringing me back to what I said in the initial introduction, that you are a woman with depth and, clarity and purpose. And I really would love to know, who are some of the women in your life, or maybe it wasn't a woman, maybe, I don't know. Just talk about some of the influences that would have shaped the way you articulate, the way that you carry yourself today, or the way you show up.
Yeah. I've had the privilege of being around a lot of women who have very deep wells of love for the people that they are around, and being able to drink from those wells have been able to fill me up. Of course, I talk about my grandmother quite a lot, who passed on, but she was a woman who did not leave after primary school. She did not get a formal education. And she then went to send her brother and her sister off to school by raising goats and farming pigeon peas. And so, there's a type of resilience that she had, but like the humor. My grandmother was a very funny individual. She used to make me laugh uncontrollably. And I used to find it so strange. I'm like, someone who lived a life as hard as her. I was like, how do you even have the space for humor? And she's like, what do you want me to do, cry? She like literally asked me, like, what do you want me to do? And that comes back down to like the choices we make, in our lives, in our day-to-day lives, to always prioritize, including joy in our lives. And even in the midst of great despair, and previous sorrow. So she was one person who I drew a lot of strength from. My grandmother, who could recite any poem from the top of her head, from the Iliad and the Odyssey to Rudyard Kipling, anything you can think of. That little girl who left school at 10 and never had a formal education was still using that knowledge, you know? I think about my aunt, Joyce Kentish-Egan, who I used to clash a lot with my aunt when I was younger. And they say that you clash with people who you're very similar to.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Listen, I'm writing that one down because I have to share that with my daughter. Oh my
Yes,
goodness.
it's true. It is true. And when I was younger, we used to have a lot of clashes, but I've at this point in my life, I've come to appreciate, the depth of her introspection. And that's where I've, drawn a lot of my ability to be more introspective and to be curious about myself. And another person who really helped me with my curiosity is one of my best friends, Quincy and Michaela. The most curious but sensitive persons that you would meet. They're able to handle life's challenges with such curiosity and sensitivity that I learned a lot of that from them, And these are women who come from families of women, who poured a lot of love into them and appreciation and that witnessing women being loved, which is something that I really, really love seeing women being loved deeply, loudly, all of the above. And I can't help but take from that, and to draw into myself where I can. And those women have taught me a lot about myself.
Thing is that oftentimes we're asked this question and we really draw for the people who are the furthest from us, and it is just refreshing to hear you give credence to people who are close to you then, people in your family, your best friends, I don't think I've asked that question and anybody have said they're best friends.
Yeah.
So I really love that. Dee-Ann, if there was one thing you could change in this world,
oh boy. I'm limited to one.
Yes, we only have time for one. Sorry. So give me, the one that pulls the heartstrings mostly. The one thing that you could change in this world. What would that be? And why?
Is this question asking me if I had a superpower?
Probably. I mean, coin it any way that you want.
In an ideal world, I'll give you the one that in an ideal world, I'd like to be able to change people's hearts and minds without, the labor, because there's a lot of labor in changing hearts and minds. But if I could do that more quickly, I would love that, sure. But realistically speaking, one thing I would change in this world, I think we talk about the word empathy a lot. We talk about it, have more empathy, I think empathy is a very overused but wrongly used word. And I think if we had more empathy for one another, but empathy also comes with something called accountability, my mind. The only way in my experience for you to lift others up is for you also to empower them to be accountable to themselves and to be accountable for those that they have charge over. Empathy on its own, so feeling for someone, I feel for this person, empathy on its own can be quite dangerous. But empathy and empowering people to be accountable, I think that's the type of combination that would allow us as a society to not just have more tolerance for one another, but also to give each other the tools to pursue this life the way God intended us to pursue it, which is you go out there, you try, you fail, you try again, you make mistakes, you learn from those mistakes, and you keep going. That's our job. We're learning as we go. And I think if we paired accountability with our love for each other, our empathy for one another, feeling and understanding what other people are going through, I think we would be able to. I think that the world that we wanted to create is one that would have been within our reach.
So it's empathy as a verb and not just, I love that. And I am learning a lot, but I suppose there are instances where you're going to just feel for people because you're not very near to them. But
yes,
I do agree with you. We have to be more proactive in how the world is shaped if we want to see the changes that we want to see, So I absolutely love that. So you talk about wanting women to be more audacious. What's one issue that you think that us as Caribbean women need to be louder about?
Ooh.
And let me also add this. What's your, like, if you had a personal vision for Caribbean womanhood, if I can put it that way, what does that look like?
My personal vision on Caribbean womanhood is really about here's the thing. I really do believe that Caribbean women already know that they have it. They have the something. They have the juice. But the missing link for me sometimes is that we are not connected enough to one another, our connections between one another to help lift. There are groups of Caribbean, and I'm not disputing that there are groups of Caribbean women that their role is to empower. And for instance, like the Beyond Woman magazine, being able to just, when I was reading through that, seeing the Caribbean women who are doing like some incredible things, really incredible things, and just being like, wow, there's a younger group of young women who cannot even imagine those things for themselves in the Caribbean. So how do we, as Caribbean women, reach down and pull up? How do we reach down to them? How do we create those linkages and connections and make them something that they're hard to break and to bend, And how do we create those lasting legacies? I've always said, I'm not gonna, I believe in female empowerment, undisputed champion. I also believe that as women, especially Caribbean women, we are existing in a space where we are mothers. We're mothers, we're sisters, we're wives, we have babies, and especially when we have young men, I think we have a responsibility to our female sisters, our sisters, to ensure that we raise our young men in a way that they would be of value to our communities. I think we have an obligation as Caribbean women to raise young men that way. And I wouldn't dare say that there aren't women who are doing an incredible job raising their young men. But I think that we could do more there. I think that there's room for greater expansion there so that we can raise people who will be allies for us as we navigate the very challenging social framework that we've inherited. And my final vision for Caribbean women, I have a lot of visions for Caribbean women. Caribbean women
I'm
they're
sure.
gonna be tired of me. They're gonna be tired of me. Um, I also, and I'm trying to fit these pieces of this framework together. I want Caribbean women to rest too. I really want Caribbean women to rest. I think that we've done a lot, and sometimes there's a lot of expectations on us, but I do believe that we have earned the right to rest.
I love that because it is something that I talk about too. This, I think that as Caribbean people, there are certain parts of our culture that we should not lose, but I find that we are gravitating towards the Western culture so much that we're losing so much of our own identity and what makes us unique,
Mm-hmm.
uniquely Caribbean.
Mm-hmm.
And this culture of grind and listen, I've never signed up for that. I will never sign up for that. And I make no apologies about it. I don't need to talk about the soft life because that has been my thing from day one,
Mm-hmm.
and choosing these things for yourself. People might say, oh, she's not that ambitious. She's not that. But listen, we need to define
Correct.
our own journeys. We need to
Agreed.
and stand in our own truth.
Agreed.
We're
Agreed.
Caribbean, we're different. We don't need to be doing that. Listen,
Agreed. Agreed.
we don't need to be
Agreed.
doing that. So
I mean, I wish and I want for Caribbean women to have more space to be soft. You know, we've spent a lot of our lives being in the trenches with our men and our brothers and our fathers and walking and toiling. I think it's time for us to create the space to be soft, and um, that is not to say that we are not ambitious. That is to say that there is a space and a role for resting. God rested on the seventh day. Why am I working? Why am I working 7 days a week?
listen, and burning the midnight oil.
No.
But
And
you talk about
go ahead.
so you talk about legacy, and I want to talk a little bit about your Small Island Big Dream
Mhm.
initiative.
Mhm.
Let us know a little bit about that and what you're hoping to achieve with that.
So my hope, and it's such a lofty, and this is my Achilles heel. I have lofty ideals, but
Nothing wrong with that.
I really want to take young Caribbean people, and in the initial stages, I wanted to take young Anguillians, but I've expanded because I think it's an opportunity that all Caribbean people can benefit from. I wanted to take groups of Caribbean young people and take them to Ghana, specifically Ghana, and I wanted them to walk the path. Because I think it's important that if we are to know where we're going, we have to know where we came from and where our roots are. I want them to see the gate of no return. I want them to experience what it is like in Africa. And then I will take them to a big city, a massive European city, a metropolis. And I want them to experience the opportunities available there. Because my experience in the Caribbean has been that where you see some young people faltering, it is for lack of exposure. It is for them not knowing and not having an anchor. And being able to provide them with that anchor so that they can expand their understanding and expand the opportunities and where they see themselves taking up space, not just in Anguilla or Antigua, Jamaica, Barbados, but in the global community and the global environment. and them being able to say, I was here, I saw this, I know it is possible. I think that is what I am attempting to do. I'm raising funds to ensure that I can make these projects successful, but it's been a dream of mine for a very long time.
I absolutely love that, because right there on my bucket list is a visit to Ghana. I tell my husband, I just want to put my foot down on that soil. I need to know where, I'm from.
Agreed.
Definitely. So I really, really love that vision for you. And I know that it will happen, I know that it will happen. So just keep at it. My final question to you is, if you could have dinner with one person from any era, who would it be, and what would you ask them?
Ooh, that's actually a tough one.
Is it?
Actually would really like to have a sit-down conversation with Nelson Mandela. And it is more from the perspective of the weight, the question of the weight. He spent so many years in prison. And my question to him is, what gave him the moral clarity that the weight was going to be worth it? And I think in all of our lives, it is the waiting. It is a waiting period in the lives of nations and in the lives of individuals. It is the waiting that we have the biggest difficulty with. And for someone to have such moral clarity, even though it was a very clear matter of morally right and wrong. But I think I'm curious, to know about it, because in our age right now, I don't know if I can say I know a lot of people who are clear voices of consciousness, people who, you talk about Maurice Bishop, you talk about all of these people, Bob Marley, etc., who had, in their own ways, they said they had the moral clarity to speak on something, and they spoke, or they did something. And I would love to have that opportunity.
That's a deep one, and I don't know how you're going to get that answer, though. Perhaps
maybe in a dream.
Yes, you never ever know, but Dee-Ann, I really, really want to thank you for coming on board and sharing space with us. It was like so refreshing. It was like sitting on our back porches and having this beautiful conversation about our heritage, our culture. It makes you take the people who have influenced your life, the big dreams that you have. And I appreciate you, the knowledge and the wisdom that you bring to whichever space that you occupy. And I just can't wait to see, I'm going to be honest with you. You're talking and we're sharing, and I am seeing Mia Motley. You know what I mean? Like I'm seeing down the road, oh my goodness, I don't know what your goals or your ideals for politics is, but like I'm seeing down the road that the TheBeyondWoman had the opportunity to interview a great person.
But we will see what God has in store.
Yes. But that is how, that is what the vision that's coming to me. And I really wish you all the best in your future endeavors, and the fact that you're taking up really, really great space, it's a beautiful thing. And you're championing Caribbean women, and you're believing in us, and you are walking ahead of us, and the expectation is that we'll follow. Those of us, will follow. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. No, it was a great conversation. Thank you so much, Jacqueline.
And that brings us to the end of this episode of the Beyond Woman podcast. I hope you're leaving feeling inspired and ready to take action. Remember, you are capable of so much more than you think. Keep pushing those boundaries, keep learning, and keep believing in your limitless potential. We want to stay connected with you, so be sure to follow us on social media at The Beyond Woman Magazine for daily inspiration and behind-the-scenes content, and to join our growing community of empowered women. Visit us at www.thebeyondwomanmag.com and www.thebeyondwoman.com, where you will find more resources and articles to support you in your journey. Sign up for our newsletters and be the first to know about our exclusive events and for more opportunities to connect. To all my Caribbean sisters, let's lift each other up. Share this episode with the women in your life who need to hear this message, and let's continue to build this powerful network together. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving us a review on this app. Your support helps us to reach more women. Thank you for being part of the Beyond Woman movement. Keep shining, keep growing, and keep living your extraordinary life.